The serpent, through his lie, deceived the woman, causing her to die. This is that devil who was a murderer and a liar from the beginning. And Jesus says he was the father of those Jews who were making of none effect his father's words by their traditions of men, thereby deceiving the people. Here the seed of the serpent is defined by Jesus as men who are deceived by the evil imaginations of their heart. If the seed of the serpent are men, then the forefather must have been man, and the temptation of the woman in the Garden of Eden was the drawing away of her own desire and being seduced. However, it pleased God to designate this as a serpent. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals. Jesus said to his followers, "Be as wise as serpents, but harmless as doves." Matthew chapter 10 and verse 16. It is well known that serpents, reptiles, possess no particular intelligence to imitate. The nature of the curse pronounced is suggestive of something more than mere serpent life and intellect. So the serpent, as used by the Lord, is a figure of speech and symbolizes ungodly men. Also the curse upon the serpent was that dust shalt thou eat, Genesis chapter 3 verse 14, and dust shall be the serpent's meat, Isaiah chapter 65 verse 25. This is in keeping with God's statement to Adam, "Dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return." The reward meat of obedience is life, while the reward meat of disobedience is death. Dust. Adam and Eve had no way of knowing what death was. They had not experienced it. The wicked thought in Eve's mind, art, related to Adam's instructions, deceived her, and it was recorded in the Bible as a conversation between a serpent and the woman. It was the same with Jesus. He had thoughts of temptation in his mind, art, relating to his Father's word. However, he was not deceived by them, nor was he drawn away by the lust, desire, to use that great power given him at his baptism for personal satisfaction and gain. So by one man's disobedience sin entered the world, and death by sin. So also one man's obedience, life, has been made sure unto many. We may conclude that the serpent is a symbol of cunning and crafty deceit in the heart of man. So when a man becomes as a child and receives instructions by the word of the Lord, and his thoughts are those of the Spirit, then the cunning and crafty deceit and disobedience, the serpent, that old devil, and Satan are crushed and put to death by the spirit of obedience. Of course, we, men, can do nothing of ourselves, but God gives us the victory through Jesus, who accomplished the work perfectly. Adam in the role of the serpent. The serpent, being symbolic, cannot make the man and woman symbolic, because Adam and Eve were real creatures, as reported in the family line of Jesus, where it is shown that Adam was the Son of God, Luke chapter 3 verse 38. A further examination of the record reports the following. Jesus, speaking to the Jews, "Why do you not understand my speech, even because you cannot hear my word? Your father, the devil, he was a murderer from the beginning, and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. He is a liar and the father of it. And because I tell you the truth, you believe me not." John chapter 8 verse 43 to 45. Now Adam was the only creature to whom a command was given that required obedience. Genesis chapter 2 verses 16 and 17. Adam openly disregarded the command of Yahweh through disbelief and disobedience, thereby becoming the devil, adversary of God, in the beginning. As by one man sin entered the world, and death by sin, so Adam became a murderer from the beginning. Romans chapter 5 and verse 12. For in Adam all die. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verses 22. Adam lived in the environment of the tree of life, but he was not allowed to remain there. Genesis chapter 3 verses 22 to 23, because he did not stand in the truth. Since the truth was not presented to any other living creature, Christ's testimony can only apply to Adam. John tells us that he that committeth sin is of the devil, for the devil sinned from the beginning. 1 John chapter 3 and verse 8. And Cain was of that wicked one. 1 John chapter 3 and verse 12. The wicked one, the devil that sinned and was a murderer from the beginning, can only apply to Adam, because he was the only one prior to Cain. Cain was the exact image of his father Adam, a murderer and a liar. Jesus testifies that the father of these Jews was the father of the lie. The Genesis record shows that the serpent was the first liar. This indicates that the father of the lie and the serpent are one and the same, and since the seed to whom Jesus was talking were men, then their father, the devil, was a man. This man was Adam, who enacted the part of a serpent. Adam is the only creature in the beginning to whom the accusations made by Jesus can fully apply. John chapter 8 and verse 44. The key to God's use of a serpent to symbolize Adam's deceit is disclosed in the following. The Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died. Numbers chapter 21 and verse 6. Here God discloses that death is in the mouth of the serpent. Deliver me, O Lord, from the evil man, which imagines mischief in their arts. They have sharpened their tongues like a serpent. Adder's poison is under their lips. Psalm 140 verses 1 to 3. They are all gone out of the way with their tongues. They have used deceit. The poison of serpents is under their lips. Romans chapter 3 verses 12 to 13. The tongue no man can tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. James chapter 3 and verse 8. Ye offspring of vipers, or serpents, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. Matthew chapter 12 and verse 34. Here God defines evil, speaking proceeding out of the mouth of man, emanating from his imagination, as the deadly poison of a serpent. The perverse conversation, as recorded in Genesis chapter 3, belongs to the same category of the above statements, and Adam was the only creature, man, in the beginning, the father of Cain, who was of that wicked one to whom these statements could apply. The record of Genesis reports that two lineages originated in the Garden of Eden: the seed of the serpent, the natural seed, and the seed of the woman, the spiritual seed. No mention of the seed of the man. Why? Because the seed of the serpent is Adam's seed. A careful examination of the record shows that Adam and Eve were given a hearing and allowed to testify in their own behalf. The serpent was not granted this privilege, but was condemned without a hearing. Why? Because Adam was the serpent of the record and had already had his hearing and given his testimony. According to the Bible, all evil proceeds from the heart of man, the devil, the liar, etc. Here is the root of sin for which Christ died, a first principle, a fundamental. Moses wrote the book of Genesis. Now Yahweh made known his way unto Moses, Psalm 103 verse 7. And Yahweh spoke mouth to mouth with Moses his servant, and not by vision nor by dream. Numbers chapter 12 verses 6 to 8. Surely Moses, with a full knowledge of God's way, understood that a serpent symbolized man. Therefore Moses used a cunning, crafty serpent to symbolize the first Adam, who brought death to the world. And when Moses placed a brazen, refined by fire, serpent on a pole, he was again using a serpent to signify a man. Compare John chapter 3, verse 14 and 15, but this time to indicate the last Adam. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 45 and 47, who brought life to the world by overcoming the work of the first Adam. The tempter. Every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then, when lust has conceived, it brings forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, brings forth death. James chapter 1 verses 14 and 15. James's every man had to include the man Adam, so was it not Adam's own lust which tempted him? The first devil. The devil sinned from the beginning. First letter of John chapter 3 and verse 8. By one man sin entered the world, and death by sin. Romans chapter 5 and verse 12. And again, by one man's offence death reigned by one. Romans chapter 5 and verse 17 and 19. However, sin is not imputed where there is no law. Romans chapter 5 and verse 13. For where no law is, there is no transgression. Romans chapter 4 and verse 15. So it is written, sin is the transgression of the law. 1 John chapter 3 verse 4. The devil must have had a law to transgress in order to sin. The only creature in the beginning to whom a law was given was Adam, the one man who brought sin and death into the world. Could a literal serpent having no law transgress? Therefore was not Adam the first devil? The first liar. Jesus said that the devil was the original liar. John chapter 8 and verse 44. Since Adam, as shown above, was that devil, then was not Adam the first liar? Jesus also said that those things which proceed out of the mouth come forth out of the heart. Matthew chapter 15 verse 18. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts. When such thoughts are spoken, they are signified by the Spirit as the poison of a serpent. Psalm 140 verses 1 to 3, Romans chapter 3 verses 12 to 13. The tongue can no man tame, it is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. James chapter 3 and verse 8. Thus a man who is a devil, Satan, liar, is called a serpent. Both Jesus and John the Baptist used this designation, O generation of vipers, and applied it to the unbelieving Jews, whom Jesus said were the children of the original devil. Was not Adam the forefather of these Jews? Since Adam was that devil and that liar who deceived Eve, Eve was deceived, Adam was not. 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 14, with words that prove to be as fatal as the venom of a serpent. Was it not appropriate for Moses to call Adam a serpent? The angel, in revealing things to John on Patmos, identified the serpent as the devil and Satan, and since Adam was the original devil, Satan, liar, was he not the original serpent? God's way. God will do nothing but reveal his secret unto his servants, the prophets. Nowhere do we find where God had revealed to Moses or any of his prophets that he created a literal serpent for lying to Eve. Also, when God uses an agent to accomplish something, he names the agent and states the agent's purpose. Here again, God says nothing about appointing a literal serpent to tempt Eve through deception. God tempts no man. James chapter 1 and verse 13. Neither would he create a creature for the sole purpose of tempting. Could anybody believe otherwise?